14 years old when I first started taking biotechnology as a subject in school. Your body was almost like a computer, but humans didn't design it. It could be programmed. Yeah, like why the hell is cancer still a thing? How come they didn't figure this out? I also met my co-founder there, Sachin. Me and Sachin went to do our masters in Sweden. Very idealistic, me and Sachin. We thought that we could solve India's energy crisis. We could just harvest all the agriculture waste and convert that to biofuel. Went to Sweden to do the research on this.
Yeah.
But then quickly realized that it's not possible to solve it with the resources that are available in the world right now. Can't produce enough biofuel to make economic sense with natural yeast. You need to genetically engineer the yeast. We had started the project with the idea that it'll convert to a company at some point. So we raised some grant money from the Swedish government. It was just a way for synthesizing DNA and then storing digital information in there. So every cell within our body actually stores like 6 GB of information.
Gigabytes.
So imagine a 3D printer and it's got a bunch of biochemicals that feed into it. Any digital file. So this could be a video, text file.
You saying you could put a video into DNA?
Yeah. Do some proof of concept work and see if this could result in a company. If you could do it in this way, that we would be saving on materials used to make DNA. Just work on the lab table, but it should be something that can go into production. Go and raise a bigger sum of money so we could actually set up a company and continue our work. So I choose to remain in Sweden.
Okay.
So we had to go back to India.
So you went back to India?
So we went back to India for a year to use that proof of concept as a way to get funding from SOS Ventures, moved to Ireland, and then we incorporated our company there. People excited, we launched a product on Amazon.
Okay.
You as a customer could come in and say, hey, I want to encode a poem in DNA. A poem.
Okay.
Gifting his wife, who's a biotechnologist, a love poem that he had written.
Interesting.
So because she's a biologist, she would know what to do with it. Focus on something else where we can get a product to the market and make a business out of it. We hit the reality of the market, which is if there's only one customer that is willing to pay for this and there's nobody else, like it doesn't make a great business case. Not something where we have to do R&D for like 5-10 years.
Right.
Which is how typically the biotech market is, but might not be many customers here. We figured that we should be doing something where we can ship a product in the very near future. To start with 256 bits. It's called a DNA sequencer. It connects to your laptop. So you add like a drop of DNA into this machine. DNA, because it's edible, it's made from edible materials. It can be put onto products and then you could link that physical good to a digital ledger. Actually even an FDA approved ingredient in food, in cosmetics, and pharmaceuticals. The difference in ours is we can grow much grander and even tell like which plant of that company did it come from. We would either spray it on the grains itself before packaging it. It has no flavor, it's not even visible to your naked eye. If it is sprayed on the beans itself, then the company that is going to convert this to say a soybean bar, is probably going to check the soybean.
Right, so that's the company that wants to check.
Which soybean came from a farm that has ethical business practices. Actually, like one of the most counterfeited goods in the world is pharmaceuticals. Okay, Helix ID is added into the coating. So it becomes part of the pill. So seed stage can be anywhere between like $500,000 to $1 million. Taking inspiration from that and developing something for the real world. Like we say, like DNA is the next silicon, the next plastic.
Welcome to Startup Hunter, also streaming on YouTube. I'm here with Nimesh Pinnamaneni from Helixworks, which is a DNA storage technology company. And they put the DNA in chocolate. They track DNA. It's really cool stuff. Watch out, watch out, watch out for that.
Thank you.
It happens every show. What I do on this show is I uncover the history of entrepreneurs. So where I would like to begin is all the way at the beginning for you. And where were you born and what did your parents do?
Okay. First of all, thank you for having me on your show. I was born in Saudi Arabia. Both my parents are doctors, and I was actually born during the Gulf War.
Wow.
And this wasn't great for our family because both my parents were doctors. As a result, they couldn't really leave the country. But then they were able to somehow send me back to India to stay with my mother's family till all of this passed over.
What city in India?
It's a city called Vijayawada.
And where's it near?
It's in the south east part of India,
So near Sri Lanka.
kind of close to Sri Lanka.
Okay. So they were doctors, and you go to India. And what was the first entrepreneurial thing you ever did? Did you sell oranges by the road? What was your first hustle, as it were?
Well, I'm not really a hustler, entrepreneur kind of guy. I think my thing has always been that I was excited about science and technology.
Yeah.
So the first experience for me was when I was, I think I was 14 years old when I first started taking biotechnology as a subject in school. And it just shocked my mind, like the fact that your body was almost like a computer, but humans didn't design it. It could be programmed. These things blew my mind. And I was wondering, how come we don't have more people excited about biotech in the world? How come more people weren't biotech engineers? Why the hell?
Because it's difficult.
Yeah, like why the hell is cancer still a thing? How come they didn't figure this out? So that's kind of how I got motivated and started myself in biotech. My hustle has always been in about convincing universities, doctors, and like other people who have valuable biotech stuff to give it to me for free, so I could run experiments and just fool around, because you get some pretty expensive stuff in biotech.
Yeah. Very high costs.
Very high costs. So my hustle has always been about bootstrapping labs and convincing people to fund us.
All right. So let's go a little chronologically, because that's what I do on this show.
Okay.
So you're 14. You're studying biotech in high school, and then you get to university. Where'd you go to school?
So most of my schooling has been in hostels, and this is in India. I went to a school in Hyderabad, which is a city close to Vijayawada, but it's kind of popular in the world for being a big IT hub.
Yeah.
So I was in a hostel there.
But where did you go to university?
So university, I went to a college in Vijayawada, where I did my BTech in biotechnology.
Yeah.
And I also met my co-founder there, Sachin. We have been classmates since then and been working on projects forever.
And did you go master's, PhD?
Oh yeah, so after the BTech, me and Sachin went to do our masters in Sweden.
Now, how did you have great grades? Why did they take you?
No, honestly, like we didn't have great grades.
Yeah.
Hardly attended class. But we kind of chose Sweden because this particular university was a global leader in converting agriculture waste to biofuels. And we were very idealistic, me and Sachin. We thought that we could solve India's energy crisis if we could just harvest all the agriculture waste and convert that to biofuel.
Yeah?
So in our mind, it was just like, oh, India's an agrarian economy, there's a lot of agriculture waste, convert all of that to biofuel, and we solve the energy crisis in a big country.
Did you try to go from Sweden, with the agricultural waste issue, and then did you try to go back to India and apply that?
We kind of went to Sweden to do the research on this, but then quickly realized that it's not possible to solve it with the resources that are available in the world right now.
So what do you think is the primary obstacle to that?
The primary obstacle is that, so generally anywhere across the world, like biofuel is still hard to do because you can't do it with natural yeast. You can't produce enough biofuel to make economic sense with natural yeast. You need to genetically engineer the yeast so that it can consume the agricultural waste.
But if it's solved once in one location, isn't that solved for the world forever?
Yeah, that's pretty much how it would be.
But they haven't done it yet?
No, they haven't. Not with agricultural waste. So you could produce biofuel from corn, but corn already has like loads of sugar in it. So it's like you're substituting food material for biofuel. Whereas agricultural waste is like all the leaves, the stems, all the parts that are thrown away.
Yeah.
So even they contain sugars.
Yeah.
So if you could harvest that, then you have like a lot of energy that you are converting from waste to fuel.
You realize biofuels are too difficult to do. And how did you get from biofuels then into biotech?
So while doing the masters, like I said, like we realized that genetic engineering was the bottleneck. And the bottleneck to make genetic engineering easier was the DNA synthesis and genetic engineering toolkit, if I could call it that. This was lacking, and so we started Helixworks to solve these problems.
Now, so you did your master's in Sweden. You did your PhD in Sweden?
No, as soon as, like while pursuing my master's, I had started Helixworks, and then after finishing, just continued with Helixworks from then.
And here's a question: how did you pay for university?
Received a scholarship.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for good grades?
Yeah.
And did you maintain those good grades?
Yeah.
Okay. So you kept the scholarship.
Yeah.
So you started Helixworks in Sweden?
Yeah. So it was a project back then. It wasn't like we didn't really incorporate the company, but we had started the company with we had started the project with the idea that it'll convert to a company some point. So we raised some grant money from the Swedish government at that time.
What was the idea, the first idea that you went after?
The first idea that we went after was just a way for synthesizing DNA and then storing digital information in there.
Okay, so let's unbreak that for all the people out there who don't have, you know, make it simplified if you would.
Okay. So this is inspired from nature. So nature has its own, hard drives. So every cell within our body actually stores like 6 GB of information.
Gigabytes.
6 gigabytes of information
in one cell.
In one cell. And so if like you put all the cells in like your entire human body, you could say that you're like a walking hard drive of like 1 trillion terabytes.
Okay,
or
cool.
probably more.
Super cool.
So this was the inspiration. Oh, there's a storage molecule that is so dense and so tiny, it just takes a few atoms to make.
What's the name of this storage molecule?
It's called DNA.
Oh, okay. I thought it was like a certain kind of DNA.
It's chemically indistinguishable from natural DNA. It's just that we used a printer to make this.
Yeah.
So it's like, you could imagine a 3D printer and it's got a bunch of biochemicals that feed into it. And when you kind of enter like the DNA sequences to print, then the machine knows how to mix the chemicals and then kind of produces this DNA molecule for you. It encodes like any digital file. So this could be a video, text file.
You're saying you could put a video into DNA?
Yeah.
That is
It's already been done too.
That's insane. I want this episode on DNA.
Do you know the band OK Go?
No. Where are they from?
It's kind of a popular band because of their unique style of shooting videos. I think one of their videos has been put in DNA by Microsoft.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're getting on a tangent. I'm getting excited.
Yeah.
Let's go back to you're in Sweden. You're starting Helixworks.
Yeah.
Tell me again the original idea. Like, now we understand DNA storage.
Mm-hmm.
What was the original? Like how?
It's like you need a better way of making the DNA molecules. Whether it's for genetic engineering, whether it's for storing information, you need a better way to print these DNA molecules.
Why? Like, what was the problem?
The problem was you can't do genetic engineering fast enough if you don't print these molecules fast enough or in high quality.
Okay.
And also because there was to us it seemed like there's an impending crisis for storing data, like large amounts of data. So we thought this makes sense to go into.
And what specifically was the goal of Helixworks at first when you're getting your grants in Sweden?
It still remained the same to this date. We just want to expand the capabilities of creating these DNA molecules.
So how did you go about doing that?
First, we needed to fund ourselves to do this kind of research.
Okay.
So we received some grant money from the Swedish government to, do some proof of concept work and see if this could result in a company.
So what was your proof of concept?
The first proof of concept work that we did was creating the architecture and doing some lab work and getting some results to verify if we were able to do something that's slightly better than what's possible or not.
Specifically on DNA, on storing information in DNA?
On synthesizing DNA.
Synthesizing DNA? For what? And is this DNA... is this DNA that you're synthesizing for the purpose of storage?
Yeah, like that DNA, like it depends on what you code. Like if you code it to work for biology, it'll work for biology. If you code it to work for storing information, it'll work for storing information. This was just an experiment to see if our technique of synthesizing DNA works or not.
Okay, and did it work?
Yeah, it worked.
And what was the primary difference in your technique versus the old technique?
The primary difference that the hypothesis that we had was that if you could do it in this way, that we would be saving on materials used to make DNA. So for example, if you're using some, say, 10 grams of really expensive material to make a piece of DNA, our goal was, can we use the 10 grams to make 10 pieces of DNA? So that was like our first work.
And so were you successful?
We were successful. And after you're successful, we realized that this was only successful in lab work, like as in like on the in an experiment.
Yeah.
It's very hard for this to scale and do something either on a commercial scale or even in production scale.
So did you pursue the scaling work to bring it to market in a scalable manner?
We had to go back to the drawing board and come up with something new.
Okay.
And this time factor in that, okay, it shouldn't just work on the lab table, but it should be something that can go into production.
Okay.
So we were naive at that time. We didn't realize all of these things. But over the years, we have been able to become wiser in some sense.
And so you're still in Sweden, we're talking right now, correct?
Yeah.
So what was the next milestone after that?
The next milestone really for us was to go out and raise a bigger sum of money so we could actually set up a company and continue our work.
Now, did you raise this from governments, from private?
We tried to raise money from the government in the form of a research grant, but unfortunately we had some visa issues to remain in Sweden.
Okay.
So we had to go back to India.
So you went back to India?
So we went back to India for a year. And
are you researching there?
Yeah, so we went back to India, and so we went to this city called Bangalore. And so Bangalore has a lot of these national institutes. So we went there and we kind of pitched them what we were doing, what we were trying to do. So they let us have some free lab space. They let us use some of their chemicals and equipment for free. And with some of the money that we had saved from grants in Sweden, we kind of funded ourselves for a year, and we did a new trial of DNA synthesis, and this time we were able to use that proof of concept as a way to get funding from SOS Ventures, and that really kickstarted Helixworks.
Where's SOS Ventures?
So SOS Ventures is a US-based venture capital firm that invests in startups across the globe through an accelerator model. So they select startups every year in different fields like biotech, like mobile software, hardware, etc. And they invest in these companies, and these companies go through a 3-month acceleration program. And
so were you still in India while you accepted the money from SOS, or did you come here?
Yeah, so this was in 2016, and this particular accelerator was running in Ireland. While we were selected, we applied for a visa and all this stuff to move to Ireland, and then we incorporated our company there, and since have been here.
So was it difficult to break down your lab in India and move to Ireland, or not so difficult?
Well, we didn't really have a lab in India because it was borrowed. But it was difficult to, in some sense, to relocate ourselves to Ireland. It took a while to do for the shifting process, but after that, yeah, so far it's been good.
And have you mainly been in Ireland since then?
Yeah, so since 2016, we have been in Ireland.
What did you accomplish there?
So while in Ireland, now that we had received funding, we went on to get people excited. We launched a product on Amazon.
Okay.
Which was we're the world's first DNA provider on Amazon.
No, what did you provide?
So you as a customer could come in and say, hey, I want to encode a poem in DNA. A poem.
Okay.
So something like 256 bytes. So it could be like a GIF or any small memorabilia.
Yeah.
And like one of the people who was buying this from us was interested in gifting his wife, who's a biotechnologist,
Yes.
this DNA with a love poem that he had written.
Interesting.
So because she's a biologist, she would know what to do with it. She would take it to a lab. She would have to like
Decode it?
decode the DNA, and then read this. So he thought it was an exciting gift
Yeah,
to give
it's a
her
great-
for their wedding anniversary.
Yeah.
So like this was the first thing that we had done like after the accelerator program, and this got us a fair amount of attention from people in the industry.
And what was the name of that? Was that just Helixworks on Amazon?
It was called DNA Drive. So basically, you buy it and then you email us the piece of information you'd like to encode, and we'd encode it for you. And after a few months, we actually put this entire process of how to do this on our website. So any enthusiast, a biohacker, could actually use a method and do this themselves. So it's open source. It's called OpenMOS, and it's available on our website.
So you said it sort of shut down, or did you decide to stop doing it?
We decided to stop manufacturing it, but we kept the way of how you could do this yourself open for people to use.
No, why did you shut it down?
Well, firstly, because this was you could say like a novelty product to let and also to let people know that this was something possible, because till that time there is no company in the world or anyone who was offering this as a service.
Yeah.
Like, most people didn't even know that this is possible.
So I think that's extremely entrepreneurial right there, because you're doing something bold and radical, right? And it's free publicity. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's just super. Like, if I put this podcast on DNA, maybe I will get, the kind of place that I would like it to be.
Yeah, like I mean, you definitely get some press if you put something in DNA. And
But the question is, like, who do I give it to, and how do I have to give it to the right person who actually
Yeah.
knows how to decode it?
yeah, so that's kind of the bottlenecks with this technology and why there isn't some serious adoption. But again, like all of this is at least in 2019, it doesn't seem impossible anymore. It's just a matter of hard engineering and just improving the speed of input-output into DNA.
Okay, so you shut down your novelty service, and what did you focus on after that?
We started working on a very niche DNA product for the biotech market. It's essentially like really long pieces of DNA that scientists take normally like 6 months to make in their own lab. So if you could make these and deliver it to them in like under 2 weeks, this would be something that they'd be really so it would be some really valuable for like cancer research and genetic engineering research.
Sure, if you're making an efficiency, if you're speeding something up,
Yeah.
there should be demand for that if it's not too expensive.
Yeah. So we started our work in this area, and we kind of again hit the same bottleneck in some sense that we're able to get results in the lab, but would be pretty expensive to do this on a production scale.
Yes.
Which means that we have to raise money. And so I was just doing a market analysis to see, okay, if you raise some amount of money, what would be the future prospects? While we could, like, people would be excited about what we are doing, I just realized that this could never be a profitable business, because the DNA market is such that the number of customers don't grow exponentially every year, because the everyday person wouldn't really buy DNA.
Sure, there's a fixed number of laboratories.
Yeah, fixed number of labs in the world, and these customers are expecting the price to drop every year, which is what they're used to. And so it just didn't feel like we could actually return money to our investors if we raised any for this particular product. So we decided that, okay, it's probably not the right thing to do. We should focus on something else where we can get a product to the market and make a business out of it.
Good. So what was that product?
So we kind of rekindled our interest in DNA data storage because at this point, there was a customer who was willing to pay a shit ton of money for this product developed, right? And so this wasn't obvious in 2016, but it started becoming obvious in late 2017. These guys were really interested because obviously they store like loads of information, and because the physical limits of silicon chip, they have to start making decisions where, should I keep this data or should I throw it, because it gets more and more expensive with every year. And so they wanted something that allows them to store unlimited amount of information for hundreds of years without burning a hole in the taxpayer's pocket. So that's why they were interested in DNA data storage, and we were invited along with other startups and research groups across the world to come together, sit down, and help the government figure out what it is they could do to make this happen. And as a result of that workshop, now the US government is actually funding some research in this area, or they're going to fund some research in this area in 2019 to the tune of maybe $50 to $100 million is going to be invested in this area.
Wow. So we started today, you were talking about chocolate.
Yeah.
How did
How did we get here? Okay.
Are you actually involved with the chocolate market,
Yeah.
and your edible product, you didn't even get to that. So how did you?
Yeah. So while this was happening, again, we hit the reality of the market, which is if there's only one customer that is willing to pay for this and there's nobody else, like, it doesn't make a great business case. So we started looking for applications where we could deliver a product within the near term. So not something where we have to do R&D for like 5-10 years,
right?
Which is how typically the biotech market is. But we want to
you're a hustler at heart, and you want to make some money now. Who doesn't?
Yeah. So
it's fun.
I mean, I want to be a business, and personally, biotech is one of the worst performing industries amongst all the other markets in the world.
But I hear you, but at the same time,
yeah.
Because a very limited amount of people have the skills to actually do what you do, it's easier. I think it's maybe more difficult, right? More expensive.
Yeah.
But I think once you're established,
that's true.
It's a lot better than other industries where you have to maybe just be faster moving. So I think there's a lot of potential in biotech.
Yeah. Since we realized that, okay, there might not be many customers here, we figured that we should be doing something where we can ship a product in the very near future. And so we figured that if we could put the smallest amount of information in DNA, it would be at a price point that is affordable for the market. So we figured that if we could put something really small in DNA, there is a market for it.
And by really small, you mean information?
Yeah, small pieces of information.
Like how many kilobytes?
Okay, so we thought, let's just start with 256 bits, because it's really small.
What can you store in 256 bits? Like a basic password?
Yeah, so that was the idea. Like, you should be able to store your passwords in DNA, or at least archive your passwords in DNA. And we thought it made sense for the crypto world.
Yeah.
Because people generally have to trust a third party to do this for them, but there are some paranoid folks who do it themselves. So we thought we could build a solution for this, and we did some basic work, got some great results, and then we spoke with the D-Lab director, Nick Plant.
What's D-Lab?
So D-Lab is a blockchain accelerator or decentralization accelerator, also run by SOSP in New York. So I reached out to the program director, Nick, and I pitched to him, hey, I'm pretty sure SOSP is invested in some blockchain-based startups. You guys probably have some crypto holdings. We have a solution here that you could archive your passkeys. So he was like, wait a sec, go back. You're telling me you're going to store our passkeys in DNA and give that to me? And how do I read it?
How do you read it?
So he was intrigued. So I walked him through how he would scan the...
Now, tell us, how would you scan it?
Okay. There's a portable device called, it's called a DNA sequencer. It connects to your laptop. So you add like a drop of DNA into this machine, and in like 30 minutes it reads all the DNA.
That's really slow.
Well, it is.
But for a lot of money, it could be important.
Yeah, it's actually designed for like high throughput, but we're using it for like, it was actually designed to read like 600 GB of information of DNA, but we are like only just putting like really small amounts. So there's like a lot of optimization work to do to increase the speed.
Now here's a basic question. The DNA is a physical material.
Yeah.
You do take a dropper of it, I assume?
Yeah.
So what happens if you run out?
Run out of the liquid?
Yeah.
The beauty about DNA is that it's so easy to make copies of it.
So if you get low in your bottle, you can like replicate it up?
Yeah. So you have a biological Xerox machine, which like no matter how much information there is, if you wanted to make like 1 trillion copies of it, it's still going to cost you like less than $1.
Okay.
So that
PCR?
Yeah, PCR.
How do you like that?
Hey, I'm glad you know what PCR. I knew that you were getting there. There were hints that you knew about PCR.
It's polymerase chain reaction for those of you uninitiated. You're talking to SOSV.
Yeah.
Did you sell them? Did they get anything from you?
So basically, Nick was like, dude, I think that's a dumb idea. I don't think anyone was going to store their crypto keys in DNA.
Yeah.
There's like Ledger Safe and like all these other options out there.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, so wait a sec, I have this another idea. Tell me what you think about this. The same DNA, because it's edible, it's made from edible materials. It can be put onto products, and then you could link that physical good to a digital ledger. And then just Nick got super interested in this because he was obviously in the blockchain space for a while, and he understood the implications of being able to connect physical goods to the digital ledger.
Now, before we even go too deep on that, had you been doing tests to know that the DNA was edible, that the DNA could survive? Like, how did you discover that idea?
That DNA is edible?
Well, just that.
Like, we're molecular biologists, and like we literally make the DNA letter by letter. We stitch it ourselves in the lab, and it's at least like people who are skilled in the art and for the FDA and everything, it's common knowledge that DNA is safe to consume. It's actually even an FDA approved ingredient in food, in cosmetics, and pharmaceuticals.
Interesting.
It's not new for the scientific world in terms of its features.
Yeah.
What was new though is that you could store information, you could encode information in these molecules, and you could read them back.
Now, how did you know that you could put it in a food item? And then can that food item be processed, ground up?
Yeah.
How did you know it could survive that?
We know you can survive that by, like, DNA itself is a nanoparticle, so there is no grinder that can really grind it per se.
Interesting.
But there are other things that could damage the DNA. For example, if you, if you like literally, heat some, like say the chocolate that has DNA to an extreme temperature, it might damage the chocolate and the DNA.
This is a possibility. So did he just give you money and said go do it, or?
Not exactly. He wanted to see what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And he had also called on the general partner, Sean Broderick, onto the call, and we kind of demoed to them how it is that you could encode a 20-bit piece of information to DNA, and then what is the process to like recover that 20-bit from the DNA sequencer.
Yeah.
So we walked them through the entire thing, and they were pretty impressed by that.
Now, did you initially? So you said food,
Mm-hmm.
and then has it come to market? Are companies doing this in the world right now?
Storing, like there are companies that use that are using DNA, like naturally available DNA, to tag products. Like for example, you could extract DNA from this tree, and then they would use that as a way to, like, if when they put it on a product, they could tell that, okay, this thing was tagged with certain DNA, so this is probably
So wait,
mine.
people are already doing this in the world?
Yeah, there's a company that has been doing this.
So what are you doing different than them? Or nothing?
So this company, pretty much the product that they provide is it's like a yes or no identification. Like if something has that security mark, then it means that the company owns it. But if it doesn't, then they probably don't. The difference in ours is we can grow much granular and even tell like which plant of that company did it come from, which manufacturing batch did it come from, what's the lot number. And then all this could be linked to more contextual information like what ingredients were used in this manufacturing process, where did they come from, all of which is not possible with our competitors' product.
Is your product out in the market in use?
It's not in use yet, but it will soon be in pilots by September of this year.
So break it down for me exactly. Like, let's take an example product. You know, like let's take soybeans. Well, let's take soybeans. So the soybean is grown, and let's say the soybean is grown in Brazil.
Yeah.
Where would you mark? And let's assume that there's a lot of competition for soy.
Yeah.
Which I don't think there is, but
it's a commodity. Yeah.
I mean, I suppose people could be selling sand instead of soy.
Yeah.
So, where would you insert your DNA tags? In the soybeans? Is it literally before the plant is grown? After it's grown? Go into some depth.
Okay. So the way you'd apply it on soybean is after it was harvested by the farmer, and so you would either spray it on the grains itself before packaging it. So that way, the soybean, like all the beans, are tagged with this DNA.
Does it have a flavor to it?
No, it's like it has no flavor. It's not even visible to your naked eye. It's a nanoparticle, and if the soybean was the size of the earth, then the size of DNA on that soybean would be like the size of a penny.
Okay.
So to give you context, like that's how tiny amount of it is on the product itself.
Okay, so you spray the beans after they've been
harvested,
and then these beans get shipped over to the United States, and they get turned into a soy nutrition bar.
Yeah.
So they get ground up, probably cooked.
Probably cooked.
So what temperature can your product survive?
So if it is sprayed on the beans itself, then the company that is going to convert this to, say, a soybean bar, is probably going to check the soybean.
Right. So that's the company that wants to check.
Yeah. So
you don't like after it's turned into a bar, you don't really.
But the company that's making the bar might add a DNA ID in its product.
Yeah.
So that the bar itself now is tagged. So.
No, but how fast is it to scan this DNA ID?
How fast is it to scan?
Yeah, what's the time it takes to scan?
It takes about 30 minutes to do a scan.
Yeah, so it's still 30 minutes.
Yeah. So that's why it is meant for a company that is manufacturing bulk ingredients.
Sure.
So you wouldn't really give it to a company that is making the bar, but the company that's making the bar is actually not actually bringing in soybeans itself. They're buying that ingredient from another company.
Yeah.
So the company that makes that ingredient is going to have the DNA already incorporated in it.
Right, I guess there's some, instead of sand, which is very easy to tell that it's not verified.
So the problem is not really to differentiate between sand and soybean,
okay.
But it's more to differentiate between soybean and soybean.
Yeah.
So you have soybean that looks the same. How do you tell which soybean came from a farm that has ethical business practices that grew it
so it's
properly?
that it's coming from the farm that you bought it from.
Yeah.
Instead of
those
fake.
cheap, something that say came from a country where they don't really care so much about business practices. They don't care whether it was grown in an organic fashion or not. So you want to be able to differentiate between those two kinds of soy,
Yeah.
and that is what we can do for sure.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. You're in pilots right now. Here's what I want to know. Over the last 6 years, you've made money from grants. Have you made money from selling things?
We have only made money from selling our vision to investors and to people who sign the grant.
Do you have 1% ownership in your future? Like,
we have a decent ownership in the company, but developing things with atoms tend to take some amount of effort and time.
It's absolutely true. I mean, I'm coming from a world where you can have an idea for an app, and in a weekend you can code up that app and put it out there. But you're dealing with a much more just difficult.
Yeah, slightly more. Yeah, they're not so.
Let's go walk.
Definitive. The thing about computer science is you can have an idea and you could code it.
Yeah.
There's no question of you can't code it. It's just a matter of time. With biotech, there's also the question of not just time. Is it even possible? Like that, solving for that itself is a challenge in itself sometimes.
Okay, so you're heavily focused on agriculture verification.
So I wouldn't specifically say agriculture, but I would say processed goods. So, a pilot could even be with a pharmaceutical company.
Now go into that a little bit.
Actually, one of the most counterfeited goods in the world is pharmaceuticals.
Okay, good. Okay, so
there's some 200 billion worth of.
So would you spray the actual pills or the?
With pills, you don't need to actually just spray them because. So a pill has an active ingredient and a coating on top of it, which could be sweet or gives the color. So this Helix ID is added into the coating, so it becomes part of the pill.
Yeah.
It becomes part of the coating process. So it's not necessarily sprayed. It's an ingredient in the formulation, and this is something that FDA has a technical term for it. It's called PCID, which is a physical chemical identifier. So what we make falls under that category. This is something that they're very well aware of. They have guidelines of how you have to manufacture this, how you have to add this into formulations.
Okay, so here's something that's coming to me. Possible competitor.
Applied DNA Science in Stony Brook, New York.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, did they do the DNA identification on the British bill?
I think they do, yeah. I think they do theft prevention, yeah.
Yeah.
So these are the guys I was talking about who harvest DNA from plants and then use that to tag a product to say if it's yes or no. Does it have the tag or does it not have a tag?
Right. So how much money have you raised over the last 6 years?
We have raised enough money to what would be called as seed stage money.
But in the biotech, that's can you give me a number because biotech could be totally different than.
Okay, so seed stage can be anywhere between $500,000 to $1 million.
How are you going to ensure that you're successful? How are you going to ensure that? Because it's very, it's possible that you don't get that nothing comes from this.
It's possible that this is going to fail, but whether we fail or we succeed, there's still the problem that exists in the world that people want to know what they're buying, where it comes from. So there's a market need for it, and hopefully we are the ones that can solve this.
Is failure an option for you?
Thing is, there's no way to. It's a very hard question to answer in some sense. Nobody likes failure.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't want to celebrate failure too. There's this tendency to celebrate failure sometimes in startup world.
I don't think so. Failing is failing. It sucks.
Exactly. So there's all that, you gain experience and all that. I mean,
even that is
sure.
True, but it's
true.
a lot better to win.
Exactly. You learn when you win too. So that way, it's a venture, right? There's a risk of failing, but if you succeed, then the outcome is good. For me and my co-founder, the reason we started this, it's all about just creating new technology, and that's really what we want to do. We just want to put a new invention, make it into a product and put it in the market, and from the biotech field. So that's our mission and goal, and we aspire to succeed. I mean, I really can't say anything more than that.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So are there any other areas that you're working on we haven't spoken about?
I think we broadly investigate what would be called as the field of DNA-based computing. This kind of comes from the idea that the life itself is like some form of computer. There are a lot of computing components within the human body, within plants and animals and so on. Taking inspiration from that and developing something for the real world, because the technology that we know, like silicon chips, the exponential growth is not going to continue forever. They've reached certain physical limits, which means that we're coming to a point where we can't grow like this every year. There needs to be a new technology that continues that level of growth. Some people, including us, believe that DNA and biotech is going to be the one that offers those solutions, whether be it the material or be it new forms of computing. Like we say, like DNA is the next silicon, the next plastic. Like plastic was the material of the 20th century. In some sense, silicon is still the material of the 21st century, but it doesn't have a scope beyond 2030, unfortunately. Like that's where it stops. Everything stops by 2030, the growth in silicon. Some people, including us, think that DNA is the next material for computing.
Oh yeah, I think there's a lot of potential. And quantum computing as well, but
Quantum computing as well.
It's totally different.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on, Nimesh.
Thank you for having me on the show, man. Really enjoyed it.
And you can download this podcast. Okay, the video of this podcast is about 5 gigabytes. Can that be encoded on? Is that feasible for you to do?
The question is it feasible for you to afford?
How much does it cost?
It's a great question. So right now, a GB of information to store in DNA costs somewhere around $200,000.
Okay, that's not happening.
So it's still fairly expensive.
What about 100 megabytes for the audio?
Anything above the bits level right now is pretty expensive.
Okay, so it's just bits are cheap, a lot cheaper.
Bits are affordable at this point. Just to give you an idea, like the world record of a file that was stored in DNA is 44 MB. That's the largest file that has been stored in DNA till date.
But you were talking about gigabytes earlier. You were talking about the theoretical limit of a cell's gigabytes.
Yeah, that's how much DNA is there in your cell. Like I'm talking about the synthetically made, like man-made.
Yeah. Oh,
So-
only 44 megs.
44 megs. So that was the OkGo video that was stored in DNA by Microsoft.
For hundreds of thousands of dollars.
That project, they say, was in a few millions of dollars with some DARPA funding and so on.
Oh boy. All right, so I guess this podcast will not be available on DNA just yet.
Maybe not for the next 24 months. Potentially after that, it's possible.
So there could be some breakthroughs.
Yeah.
All right, so check back in with me then. And let me know. Maybe you'll reactivate your service for video.
Yeah. Because the US government has a pretty ambitious target. So they want to get to a terabyte of data stored in DNA
Yeah.
for $1,000.
Yeah.
48 months.
That's very ambitious,
It's pretty ambitious.
given that you're only at 44 megabytes today.
Yeah, and that it just costs like, several orders of magnitude more expensive than the $1,000 they're hoping to get it to. We're getting there. It's not so far away.
All right, so thank you so much for coming on, Nimesh. And check out Helixworks. I hope you found some value out of it.